All right, we should be live now. This was a last second stream that I set up here, so definitely not expecting too many people to be here initially, but um, appreciate those who are jumping in. Um, so I just want to share some of my feelings in a live format on the alpha and beta playtest prototype situation that's been going on. Um, because it's it's a really unfortunate thing, and I want to try and say some things that will be, I'm hoping, are productive and kind of helpful to the discussion and the conversation and the tone of the discussion and conversation. The first thing I want to say is just a big thank you um, to PFM from E4. I haven't talked to PFM in a long time. I haven't been on E4 in quite a while, but it's a name that I remember fondly and am familiar with. For those who don't know, PFM is really the one, from what I can tell, who did the work to figure out that these were indeed a lot of these alpha and prototype cards. For those who don't know, if not all of them or all of the recent ones that have come to market, were printed in 2024 instead of in 1996 when they were supposed to be printed. I really want to thank him for what he did. Um, it's very painful. His findings are painful, and it's frustrating for a variety of reasons to see that these are indeed faked, or there's some element to them, or they're reprints of originals, or whatever it ends up being. Um, uh, but I believe that he has saved a tremendous amount of pain and money and problems for so many people in this hobby in the long run. I think this would have affected these would have been sold and resold and moved around all of the big companies, potentially even someday graded by PSA and other grading card companies. And it's, I think a lot of us share the sentiment that it's unfortunate that PFM, that someone, a single person whose job is not to authenticate cards, is the one that discovered this. But I really want to thank him personally, because I care a lot about this hobby, and I think a lot of us share the exact same sentiment. And you know, again, it's. I wish he had never found any of this, in the sense that I wish they were real. But I'm very of the mind that if something is scammy or something is wrong, it is best to shed as much light on it as quickly as possible, because I think toxic things have a way of reverberating toxically through and causing lots of people to behave badly, and more people would have been negatively affected over time. So anyway, let's start with a sort of positive note, um, that thankfully these were discovered to be fake fairly early in their existence into the market. We wish it had been at the beginning, and we wish they never would have been graded and authenticated. But um, thank you, PFM, for saving so many of us so much more headache and stress. And I think, frankly, um, more a lot of the people who made money off of these should also be thanking PFM for, um, although they may lose some money in the short term, in the long run, this will help their reputations. This will help them be honorable and ethical. And being honorable and ethical in business over long periods of time, and having communities of people built around authenticity and honesty, is so vital to the long-term health and success of any group of people. And so I would hope, even if you've been like myself. I haven't sold any of these. I'm sure I would have eventually, So thank you to PFM for finding this out before I sold them to people and spread more of that kind of toxicity or pain throughout the hobby. But I do happen to own quite a lot of them. Here's just a chunk of the ones I have here to show. I just as a collector, I'll start there. I love these cards. I love the way they look. I love the story. I was very excited to learn about them. I was very excited to buy them and own them as a collector. And I was excited to potentially make money off of them and flip them and resell them into the future. Um, and I think um, the biggest learning experience that I think first I'm just gonna say that likely I'm very lucky, and although I made a mistake in buying these, and I think everyone needs to take personal accountability and responsibility first and foremost before you start pointing the finger at other people, is to first point the finger at yourself and acknowledge the mistake that you made. I got caught up in the hype. I got caught up in wanting to make money. I got caught up in the history, in the excitement of all these things. And although I don't think anything I did is unethical, I still made mistakes. And I think one thing that I think is really important to differentiate in this whole conversation, there are lots and lots of people who have made mistakes and should apologize for them. But I doubt there are lots and lots of people in this space that did things that are really unethical. There are clearly some amount of people at the top of this, and who knows how far it went down, who knew what was happening or at least had really strong suspicions. And those people have clearly um, committed very serious fraud. But as it comes down, Z and G, James, all the different auction houses that sold these, right? Everyone wanted to profit off of these and be involved in profiting off of these. And in trying to profit off of these, we've caused some harm to the Pokemon community and to our customers. And although I definitely do not feel like someone like James, I'll use him as an example. I do not feel that James has done anything unethical. I think it's very appropriate for him to come out, apologize the way that he did, and because he cares about his customers and his business, and then make people whole immediately. I do think that most of the auction houses and the grading card companies, from conversations that I've had behind the scenes, are likely going to follow suit and do the same thing. Um, Expectation, and until the money is in your bank account, nothing is guaranteed, because you don't know how wide ranging the issues are going to be. You don't know how much they're actually going to pay out. All of these types of things. Um, and so it's the anger that is being directed right now towards certain companies and certain people. A lot of that, right, is totally understandable. I'm angry too. My first reaction when this happened was, you have got to be kidding me. This incredibly cool, exciting thing. Like, I've just been scammed. I've just been duped as part of a large fraud. I've just been taken advantage of. People in my Patreon, people I'm friends with that I've talked to about this stuff, have been taken advantage of. And I've been complicit in that by saying things, privately. Fortunately, I wasn't making YouTube videos at the time, but privately, if I had been, I would have been probably talking fairly positively about these, honestly. But privately, saying things to people, behind the scenes, like, I'm buying some of them. I think they're really cool. I've talked to a number of the people involved, a number of my friends involved, and they've told me positive things about it. It seems like they're legit. CGC has authenticated them. I think most of us, if not all of us, like, who bought these, only bought them at the end of the day because CGC authenticated. That was the last piece of the puzzle we needed. But there was also our friends and people we trusted, and influencers that we trust, and big names in the hobby that we trust. And we all should take accountability and responsibility for the role that we played in that. So yeah, so it's a time to kind of feel sorry, I think, and to feel, you know, badly. Try not to think that a lot of the people that people are lashing out at are also victims of people above them, but there are also victims of people below them that they should be apologizing to. And it's a very complicated situation that has affected patience. Really important. It's very hard to be patient when you're out a lot of money. I'm out, you know, over $100,000 probably. And although I think it's likely I'll get that back, it's hard to be patient and to be calm. But I guess what guides me is that I care a lot about this hobby. I care about the people here. I care about the relationships I've made. I care about the companies that are in the space. I don't view the companies that are in the space as a um, something that as I view them as a positive overall to the hobby, and important for the long term growth and success and enjoyment of the hobby for all of us. And I'm hoping this will be a learning experience for everyone involved. Um, and yeah, it's um, it's definitely painful. I don't think that we'll see how many people come out and actually apologize and take accountability. I think it's very hard to take accountability in the internet culture because of how cruel people are at times. I'm seeing takes out there. I'm seeing people lash out at certain people, and it feels nasty. And people who are having takes about certain content creators or certain businesses when they don't really have any insider information and don't know, but they're just sort of angry and upset, and they want someone to lash out at. I do think that hopefully the people there are different categories of people, I would say, involved in this, right? At the top, there are the people who knew that these were fake. Someone knew, some group of people, some individual. Hopefully, will the FBI or whoever's going to be investigating this is going to be a massive thing. Eventually, we'll get to the bottom of it, and we'll figure out who are the people responsible, and we'll get some maybe a little bit of closure from that, or a little bit of greater comfort and understanding. Obviously, one thing that's difficult is, like, who do we trust going forward, who has our backs, who's ethical, and then there's all sorts of shades of gray, and I'm going to go through it involved in that. The next group of people, I would say, are the people who wanted to get rich quick, and there was a lot of get rich quick energy going on. Okay. And that get rich quick crew, I would call it, who wanted to get rich quick and who wanted to make a lot of money, um, they were in a psychological position where they were persuaded to maybe do some things or take some risks that maybe they wouldn't have if they weren't so money motivated. That ended up hurting the hobby, that ended up hurting their customers, that ended up hurting their friends. And I do think it's important to come out and say, I wanted to make money on these, which is not unethical in my personal opinion, but that may have clouded my judgment, and I put it above, taking care of my customers and making sure that everyone gets authentic things. And I think that some companies and some individuals at companies and some influencers and some auction houses and some people are more behaved worse than others, and I think some companies and some people have more responsibility than others. I think that CGC has the most responsibility for authenticating, for saying whether or not these are real, more than anyone else involved, frankly. They're the ones that put their name on it. They are the ones that had the most, in my opinion, the largest ethical, and all this is gray. But we all have everyone who brought them over, everyone who had conversations with Akabani or Akabani's team, everyone who made videos saying that or talked about them, saying that they thought they were real or real enough. There's accountability kind of all the way down that line, and in and there and that's part of the discussion I think happening right now. I just would push people to not have that discussion in a cruel way, where you are attacking and hurting people who are human beings. They're complicated. people make mistakes, sometimes, and uh, you should just because some people made some mistakes, I think, with these, doesn't mean that they're fundamentally bad people or that they haven't done lots of great things for other people in the space. And it doesn't mean that they're hopeless or and the harder people are on these people, the more rude and the more critical, the more likely they are to withdraw and get defensive rather than respond well, which is being more open, apologetic, trying to make things right. That is the sort of thing that we want to try and create as much as possible. We want to encourage people to make things right and to do the right thing and not make it harder by having the pitchforks out in an over the top way. Um, would be what I would say. So we have that group, and then we have the groups of the collectors, the people who, like me, who never sold any of these, who never profited from any of them, but I probably would have sold them at some point in the future, maybe even within the next 6 months. If I could have gotten, if I got an offers on any of these cards that were quite a bit higher than what I paid for them, I probably would have sold them. And I was trying to actively buy more. And I felt that if these were real, right, this market was personally, I felt that the market was extremely undervalued, and these were, incredible pieces of history that were worth sort of speculating on. Um, uh, so my accountability is and anyone who bought these as a collector, there is some personal responsibility you should take that you were maybe a little money hungry yourself, and maybe you got a little over your skis in terms of wanting to own a piece of history, and you got a little blinded by that excitement and by that collector dopamine hit. I know I did. And that does not mean you are a bad person. It does not. You were taken advantage of. I was taken advantage of 100%. And there are people above who are quite unethical, but you gotta take personal responsibility. Um, and I think a lot of people struggle taking personal accountability, and so then they lash out, right? I lost money, and so how could these people do it to me? When in reality, it's like what it would be very productive for you to say, how did I get myself into the situation? Because no one held a gun to your head to buy these. No one held a gun to my head to buy these. I bought them. Um, and uh, Understanding sort of why I did, and living with that sort of risk. When you speculate on things, there is quite a bit of risk. And buying collectibles in general, there is a decent amount of risk, and dealing with these grading card companies, we're seeing there's a certain amount of risk. I think the grading card companies, CGC probably saw, dollar signs here, and the opportunity to bring these to market was very exciting for them, I'm sure, and I totally get it. Like, this was a very cool thing, and a very cool thing for CGC to be the one to authenticate it and have it in their cases, and all of that would push them to do as little authentication as possible, or as little, like, I'm sure they really wanted it. They really wanted to push it through, and I think that often when there's a lot of money at stake and there's a lot of reputation at stake, that's when these mistakes are made. It's when people are the most willing to do fraud because, and again, I don't think I wouldn't use that word for, I wouldn't necessarily at this point use the word fraud for anyone outside of probably the very, very, very top of this ladder. But I think that there's quite a bit of room between they didn't do anything illegal and they did stuff that hurt their customers, right? And I think that it's very good for companies to own up to these things. And I wish we lived in a culture and a world where people took personal accountability and responsibility for buying them, and then up the ladder, people took responsibility for the various businesses they had and where they were at. I think James came out and took responsibility to, I forget exactly what he said. I'm not sure if he apologized in the video, but I think that that sort of tone, right? It's very hard to do. It's very scary. You're out a lot of money. Um, and obviously there are collectors, and we've heard stories. There are small collectors who have put most of their money in this, who, invested in these because they thought they were going to make a lot of money, and now they're very disappointed, and it's very upsetting, and there's a lot of faith and trust that's been lost, and I think that it will take time to rebuild that. But to those people, I want you to know, like, there are plenty of people here. There's lots and lots of people here who care, who are committed to trying to make these things right. There are people at these companies that I've talked to. Remember, these companies are filled with people. There is no one person at any of these companies or any of these organizations. And even if there are some bad actors, it does not mean the whole company or the whole or everyone involved is a bad actor. Um, and frankly, there are probably lots of people at these companies, at these different auction houses, that feel incredibly badly about this, and that are really trying to make it right. And so trying to, I think being I think being optimistic about that sort of thing is not being foolish, right? It doesn't mean that, like, we should hold people to account ultimately, and the internet is very loud, and people have very strong takes and are very angry, and they likely will be. But I think that you need some companies and individuals, they need time to kind of process, think through these. The way that people are going to behave, it's why I didn't make a video right away, because the way someone's going to behave, like, right after something like this is going to happen, is going to be different than how they're going to behave a week after, or a month after, or a few months after. It's a process of sort of like grief, honestly. Those who, like, lost a ton of money, those who are losing their businesses, those who are, like, you know for most people out there, they really are just kind of watching this happen, and it's making them doubt sort of these grading card companies, and their fellow collectors, and it's putting a lot of negativity out there. But for those who are, like, massively financially impacted, it's way more serious. It's there's a whole nother level of anxiety and emotion, and yeah, we just got to give it time. And so I'll probably leave it there. Again, I've had positive conversations with most of the heads, or near the heads of the different auction houses and grading card companies, or I've had very close friends who talked to them sort of on my behalf, and information was relayed, and you know, everyone's aware, everyone's working on it, and I would preach patience, and these times it's a good time to, like, self-reflect. Hey, was I too money hungry? Was I too greedy? Did I want too much part of history? I got the all the things that make collecting fun can also make it toxic. And there's a certain line where you can cross into that unethical, toxic behavior around money. And that's a very important topic for anyone who's running businesses or starting businesses, is what are your business ethics? How do you maintain that while your goal is also to make money, and to profit? So, yeah. So I don't know if people have any questions, comments. I'm pretty sure I probably said my piece now. I know a bunch of you just jumped in late. Feel free to watch the video from the top. Started with some big thank yous to PFM, and yeah, shared all my thoughts. So if people have questions, if people have comments, I'll kind of go through the chat very very fast, and then I'll probably just make this like a 30-minute video. So probably do another 6-7 minutes. Yeah, mistakes are valuable. Never regret a mistake. Oh, it's not letting me show on the screen. Yeah, that's a comment that someone made, that mistakes are valuable. Yeah, I mean, often cliches are cliches for a reason, and this is a good one. And if you want to grow as a person rather than get depressed and sort of be torn down by these types of events, it's very important to try to have that attitude, um, and push back against some of that sort of hopelessness, and say, okay, this is a sign, this is a lesson. I feel like I'm going to take lessons from this personally, and I'm going to be a better person, collector. Losing a lot of money, experiencing a lot of pain. I feel like I trusted certain people. I I thought that I could handle certain stress that I don't want to do anymore. There's a lot of things about this that I'm reflecting on and going to take, personal lessons for that are, very valuable. And once you have enough money to pay your basic expenses and your, often the lesson is worth more than the money. Um, obviously, I think I think paying your basic living expenses and your physiological expenses are more important than any self-actualization or realization, although I think you certainly need those, one to get to the other. But outside of people who are in that situation, I think the learning experience is incredibly valuable and worth a lot of loss and financial loss to learn. Anyone who isn't taking action to fix the situation down the pipeline this needs charges pressed against them and to prove their own innocence. Yeah, I mean, I think over time, I think as far as like legal charges, right? Did people legally do things wrong? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an expert on that. I think these lawyers will get my understanding and probably very likely. So maybe I'll end up being wrong about that, but they've done that for sports card, issues and comic book issues in the past. So we'll get more information. I think the first part is trying to gather information, and then people who hopefully can take some accountability coming out and taking that accountability. Um, and as I've said, I think that I would have been in a situation where I would have probably been talking about these more and talking more positively about them and sharing more positive things if I had been public for the last 3 months, because I've really been really liking them for the last 3 months. I didn't buy any initially when the prices were quite a bit higher, but once they got down to like that $1,000 a card for the lessers and 3 to 5 thousand for some of the more popular Pokemon, particularly with the beta set, like I was buying a lot, and I probably would have been sharing some more and person that maybe they trusted and they would have had a little bit more confidence to then buy, and they would have been hurt by that. You know, uh, yeah, the scans and the things that have been done could be done while the card is still in the slab. But I'm definitely like I'm not an expert, nor yeah, I don't want to talk too much about like the authentication process or share any misinformation around that. I would refer to like that grade E4 thread that's going on and people who are more actively taking a role in that, and then hopefully what CGC does, and hopefully CGC will explain more. I was skeptical at how many clean cards there were, but never would I imagine this. Yeah, I think the one time I talked about this a few weeks ago, I talked about that was certainly one of my concerns. But I think my response to that in my own head was these were probably never played with, very likely, but they were probably extras printed, or they were printed maybe to potentially be played with and just never were played with, or they were something that were from the early time of Pokemon and Akabani's collection, and they just never used them at all, any of them to play with. But they were still from that time period, and they were still a unique part of kind of Pokemon history. And I still thought they were really cool. Any of those scenarios still would have made them really cool to me. Um, so that's like where I was at with it for sure. Definitely one of the concerns. Um, This was obvious and was speculated about in the deep underground circles online for a while now. Surprised it took this long. So I really don't think this was obvious. I would disagree. I think I've been involved in probably a lot of the most high level conversations on the Western side of this, and a lot of collectors who have taken risks on these before and have been right a lot, bought these and were involved in these and took chances on them, and a lot of the people who were skeptical, including myself. I mean, I've been skeptical. Scott Pratt, me, tons of people on E4, right, have been skeptical of these. Doesn't mean we didn't buy some or buy a lot of them, or in some cases. So because of the price point got to a point where it was sort of worth the risk reward. This is the whole like this was obvious or like people are awful or those types of takes I would push against just because um uh and this is always my issue with like the investment discourse or so much of the financial discourse online where it's like it was obvious that was going to go it's like in hindsight it was obvious it's like I mean, if the most educated, most seasoned collectors with the most inside information are being duped, like it was not obvious for the person who was just watching back from their couch. So with all due respect, and I maybe you had insider information and so it was obvious to you, but so I'm not this comment is not necessarily directed at you. Please don't take it personally. Just in general, when I hear those comments, I have that response. I think it's also why I don't like talking that much in public. I think a lot of the noise and a lot of people's takes are just sort of like people just kind of spouting off. A lot of like 90% of those E4 threads, frankly, were just people spouting off and not contributing to the conversation. With an occasional comment by PFM or by someone to actually add some hard information. I think it's fine. People just kind of spouting off, but we need to take that as spouting off. People who are trying to authenticate these things and who are trying to have figure these things out those conversations are not helpful. Um, for sure, and I think I'm sure there are cases of this, or it's a very bad start. It's a very bad start to the hobby for someone who's engaging. It's bad for everyone. Um, so like learn a lesson, but you're not to blame for being scammed. So I always think that life is not black and white, and life is gray. And there's generally when someone gets taken advantage of or is scammed, there is some weakness that person had that was exploited. Now other times there wasn't any, and and there's all sorts of levels of gray in there. So I think when you are scammed in anything in life or taken advantage of by anyone, or in a relationship someone takes advantage of you, these things happen all the time in interpersonal relationships in small and big ways. It's helpful to start with, okay, how did I what able to be taken advantage of here, and how do I try to not be taken advantage of in the same way in the future? Again, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that I did anything unethical, but I may have done things that were unethical, and possibly on the side of like just being too money hungry, or on that side. But maybe I just can be a better businessman, do a better job, be a better collector, better business person, trying to take lessons from this, trying to learn. These are we can theorize about these types of things when they happen, which frankly they're sort of inevitable. These things are inevitably going to happen. There's a lot of fraud in business, and these things will inevitably happen. Um, uh, it's a good life experience to reflect on it, learn those lessons, become a more savvy person. Try not to shut down, develop some wisdom out of it, as much as possible. Reminds me of the Logan Paul sealed box. The way you're articulating it, Jake. Money on the line won't make a man blind. Absolutely, and I think we don't know, or I don't know exactly. There was obviously I didn't watch all of the Rattle videos. Honestly, I don't, and I don't. We don't need to relitigate all of that. But there's a difference between someone who. This is why it's such a gray thing. Like in your brain, there's a difference between, well, I know this 100% this is fake, but I really want to make the money, versus, hey, I know there's a 20% chance this is fake, but I really want to make the money, so I'm going to do it. Or 30% or 5% or 1%. And then it's like, in my mind, it's like part of why I tried to behave ethically around these is when I talk to people about them, I told them I think there's probably 10, 20, 30% chance, whatever it is, that they are indeed some version they probably weren't played with. Now, I genuinely thought there was probably less than like a 2% chance they were just completely fake like this. So, my assessment was just wrong. People are they're more capable of fraud than I realized. One, Akabani and his team or whoever, right? More capable of fraud than I imagined. People worse than I could have imagined. Which is a sucky thing to acknowledge and admit. And frankly, CGC and some of these other middlemen did things that were more incompetent than I imagined. And so it was a mix of greater incompetence and that eventually trickled down to me being willing to buy them again, and uh, we all got duped, right? Yeah, yeah. I think that putting people into very specific categories isn't so helpful, but trying to understand sort of the spectrum, and really only each of us individually really know what was going on in our head and our heart. We can only guess at what this influencer or that influencer or this company or that company. And again, companies are filled with hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, right? It could have just been one bad egg, right? At CGC, or who knows? It's total rampant speculation, but any thoughts on ratios of real ones versus fakes? No, I probably won't like add my 2 cents into that conversation, because I would just, hopefully CGC is going to take the reins on that. um, but E4 is going to continue to, like, people over at E4 definitely, PFM and others are going to continue to investigate, I'm sure, and have been. I know that they posted that the metadata on some of the ones that had come out in 2022 and sold then, the metadata on those were from 1996. That's what they said. So, I'm not an authenticator. I'm not going to add anything to sort of the authentication conversation at the moment. Blaming yourself is dark. The only person responsible are the ones that produce and knowing sold fake cards. So I think that I tend to think that everyone should start with themselves in things in life. It's I think that you will behave way better. Um and so I don't think it's dark at all. I actually think it's quite light. I think it brings light into the world. I think the question is, can you look at yourself in a way that doesn't harm yourself? And that's actually a psychological skill where you can take accountability without psychologically wounding yourself and putting yourself out of commission. So I think some people, the reason they're so defensive and the reason they attack so much, and this is including myself in my life at times, right, is because it's painful to take personal accountability. But if you can get over that pain, take some accountability, realize what you did right, what you did wrong personally, you can actually learn from it and improve. Way easier said than done. And I think that's like a very light thing to do, not dark thing to do. Um, hey Joe, nice to see you here. I knew you'd have interest in these, and it sucks to hear you got hosed. What do you think is the appropriate action for CGC to take, and does it bring into question CGC on a broader scale? I probably don't want to speculate too much on like that. I mean, I think hopefully, I don't know what type of, things that pop into my head are how much money, how much are they exposed? Like, how much are these cards really worth? How many are out there already? How much money can they get back from some of the people who graded them, or if they go after those people who like brought them from Japan, like some of the people who middled it over, or are they going to just go after like some of the Japanese contacts who originally sold them and faked them? Are they even going to be able to find those people? How are they going to go after them? Right? It's like, if CGC, ideally, CGC comes out, this would be the ideal scenario. If they have the money to do this, CGC comes out, CGC apologizes for um, uh, the lack of for the fact that they took these people's word. They explain the whole process in detail. They actually tell us what happened, and they explain how if they had done this, they would have been able to catch it. And they explain why they didn't do what PFN did. And there's just full transparency. Um, and then and an apology around that, and then it gets into sort of the legal side of like what's their legal responsibility, because obviously I think it's very highly likely that they were lied to. Now, is there an employee at CGC who knew? I don't, none of us can know that. None of us may ever know that, because the problem with really deceptive, dishonest people is that they're really deceptive and they're dishonest. And so actually outing them is very difficult. People who are very honest and come out and take responsibility and accountability, it's very easy to see when they do something deceptive, but it's very hard to do it when someone's dishonest, because for obvious reasons. So it's going to be a challenging process, but yeah, hopefully they will be able to get some of that money back, or maybe they have insurance for these situations. I don't know, some business insurance, some sort of like they were defrauded on some level, and maybe they can prove that and then be recouped, and then they'll pay back. I think one interesting discussion is the market has dramatically changed on these. So from the beginning, when people were buying these in the beginning to now, the prices on most of these cards have fallen dramatically. And so if CGC is going to pay out the market value, are they going to pay out the price that you bought them at? Or are they going to pay out the price that they're currently going for? Because there are certain people who bought a card for 20 grand or 40 grand or 50 grand, and now the card's 4 grand, 5 grand or 6 grand or 7 grand. And then how are they going to assess the market values? Are they going to go after the lowest auction, or are they going to, take a market value, an average market value? It's there's a lot of, my instinct on that would be it's probably the most fair thing to do is to just take a market average, because paying out the people in the beginning is going to cost CGC so much more money. And is it fair to put it on CGC that people speculated on these really early and then they fell a lot in value before it came out that they were fake? I'm just not, I don't know. The ethics around that's very complicated, and it's going to be a lot of discussions, and I may change my opinion in like a week or two. I don't want to be, social media is so like, you said that, we're holding you to that. It's like I'm in real time processing this with the rest of us. So, okay. And answer a couple more here. Jake, I know I've already got over the time I wanted to go. I'm going to go for 7 more minutes. I'm going to try to get through as many of these as possible. Jake, how does this make you feel about CGC cards in general now? For example, are you less likely to want to buy, sell more on those set cards, even if it makes financial sense to buy it? Honestly, I haven't even thought about it, John. I'm not a CGC collector, so it doesn't really impact me in that way. I do know some big CGC collectors who are having those conversations and have had more immediate thoughts. Like, I know some pristine collectors or people who are like, have put a lot of money, right, and they're having those conversations. I don't think I think that the companies. My immediate reaction is like, let's see. Okay, this is how I would say it. I think if they handle this well, I'll probably think of CGC the same as I think of them now. I think if they don't end up and I'm trying to reserve judgment until they try to figure this out. I think if they don't explain what happened and they're not open and honest and they keep the information hidden, I am going to assume that there's some sort of legal reason why they did that, and I'm going to assume probably something nefarious. And I will look at them slightly differently. It doesn't mean that I won't ever use them or I won't engage with them completely, but I may look at them differently. I think I think if you're holding lots of things back over a long period of time, it's often because there's some sort of nefarious reason. Now, sometimes companies hold back information because they're trying to protect individuals, and they need to, and that's like the ethical thing to do. And in reality, they look guilty, but they really aren't. But it's rough, man. Public image and these types of things. It's why it's so wild that CGC made this mistake, in the first place, or and whoever they trusted. It really sucks. I mean, and it's such a gamble because it's so much money and it's so many cards. Like if it was a few cards, it would be a lot less of a gamble for CGC, right? But because they kept accepting more and more, and then the number of sets kept growing and information wasn't, what did they know? What didn't they know? When did they become suspicious? This is do they become more suspicious over time? Because if CGC became more suspicious over time, but then didn't come out and warn people or say anything, is that a problem, right? Ethically, like, about with Joe from Omnipoke's question, like, what should they do? Like, how much should they pay out? Well, if they knew these were fake earlier on, like maybe they should pay out earlier on, the prices earlier on, because people who got duped, like less people would have gotten duped, and the people who bought them, like they at that point is where the market average should be on the prices versus like now when they're sort of at the bottom that they've been. It's is CGC going to come out and claim that they have zero value because they're fake, and so we don't have to pay anything out? I don't know. Let's hope not. A lot of great comments here. I apologize. I'm skipping a bunch. This is a good question. Are you going to send yours back, Jake? I don't know what to do with mine at this point. Yeah, I'm in. I probably will send them back. I am like talking directly to CGC, so I'm definitely going to talk directly again to them and tell them I'm sending them back. I don't want them to get like lost, or just like cracked before. Like I want to know. I personally am gonna ask CGC, what are you gonna do with these, and I want to know how I'm gonna be paid back, or if I'm gonna be paid back, before I just hand them to them. Because my concern is like they're gonna offer me less than I would want to take, or they're gonna be, and then if I send them to them, am I not gonna be able to take legal recourse? Like, will that hurt me legally? Like, so these are questions I would ask. I would ask your lawyer. I would ask a lawyer on how best to handle it. I want to just trust CGC, and I want to trust like everyone, like that people are going to be honest and good. But when it comes to money, I think you have to be careful protecting yourself. So I have not sent mine yet. I do think the pro sending them in is you could maybe get to the head of the line, and the payout. There may only be so many funds to pay out. And again, this is all rampant speculation. I know nothing. I have no personal information on this, but just thinking logically about companies, right? When they're the front of that line, has a lot of value. You want to be at the front of the line. Um, you know, this is when companies. I'm not saying CGC is going to go out of bankruptcy. I think it's a very large company, but when companies go bankrupt, right, one of the things is like, who's the senior loan, right? Who's going to get paid back first? How are we going to distribute the assets that are there? And oftentimes, not everyone gets paid back. So. All right, I think we will end there. Lots of great questions. I can take this one quickly. What do you think about the statement CGC put out today? The expected early response insufficient. I haven't read the whole statement. My understanding is it like wasn't much of a statement. It was just sort of like send us the cards. I think I watched Rusty's video really quickly. I haven't read the statement myself, so I don't have too much comment on it. I will obviously want to know. So they have a whole legal team that's advising them. Like, we're gonna just have to like be patient, play this out. If you have a lot of exposure to these legally, I would also probably talk to a lawyer about what the best course of action is to do. They are expensive, but they're often worth it. So anyway, I wish everyone the best of luck. You know, I love this hobby. It's a huge bummer. It hurt. It's painful to me on a personal level, because it's just been such a fun experience collecting over the years, and the idea that people in Japan or a founder of Pokemon or people high up in Pokemon would do something like this is really upsetting. And then and it also puts a light on, and maybe we all need to ask the question of like, all this get rich quick energy, like, it's toxic, right? It's unhealthy, right? So um, there's a point to that, right? Like the screaming and the yelling, at people trying to make money is not the way to go about having the conversation. But the way to go about the conversation is, how do we encourage people? How do we build businesses? How do we make money in the space? How do we collect in the space and enjoy the space and consume? Not just make money, but consume. And put money into the space. Like, how does everyone do that ethically? And how do we control that? And how do we suss out bad actors? And um, it's a wild west, collectibles. So they're not securities. We don't have government agencies, actively tracking this sort of stuff. So a lot of it is on the community. And in this case, I'll end here. PFM, E4, people who excuse my language, but just give a shit. Like, obviously give a shit. Um, Thank you. You make the hobby a better place to be, a more fun place to be. And the more people like that, the more people with that attitude, the more enjoyable all this will continue to be. So I'll end on that note, and hope everyone has a good one. Thanks, everybody.